right. I see that we're rolling. I know I did one yesterday, a video for Bluebird Semaphore. And like I've pointed out, I'm identifying them now but via the date. So overall, they're always going to say something like World History for Ordinary People. Hopefully I'll put my name in it, Joseph Wemberg, and then I'll put the date. Yesterday I don't think I put my name in, but it doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start inserting in these world history clips. That's what the YouTubers like to call their documentaries, clips. Well, listen, call them what you may. I'm going to start a feature where it's essentially old books read, or the video will be the reading of some portion of an old book. And like the first one I'm going to do is an old book, probably before 1890. I can't nail it down precisely, but can you see it? What do you got there? So it's called Tales from Shakespeare. So it seems like in other stuff on that title page is reference to the authors, which is you get both their names, Charles and Mary Lamb. Okay. Now, just from this frontispiece, I can tell two things. That the book I have was published sometimes after 1838, because from my looking into this, I found that Mary's name had not been added to the book's cover at all until 1838. So the book that I have is something after 1838. And I'm further convinced that it's probably 1890 time frame. Could be earlier, could be a little later, but somewhere in there. And the reason I can be pretty convinced about that is because the publisher, George Routledge and Sons, New York, 9 Lafayette Place, and London and Glasgow. According to what's on the internet, the this publishing house and this book are associated with the date 1890. So I'm pretty content with looking at this as from 1890. Now, what they did, Charles and Mary Lamb, they decided post 1830. Oh no, maybe even post 1806, when they first pre, or just about 1806 and thereafter, they set out to condense the plays of Shakespeare into stories, thus the name Tales from Shakespeare. And they did that because they thought the play format of Shakespeare's plays were going to be a little too difficult for the young people of the day. And that's not hard to believe, because the format of the plays are probably a little hard for the adult population of 2024. Be that as it may, you'll find that these stories are not written for children who are absent of knowledge or absence of a good capacity in the English language, and not at all. You'll find these stories well written, and my rationale for that is that their audience of readers, young readers, children in the day, they would have been for the upper class, well-educated types. You know, the lower classes and people living in poverty, they weren't reading Shakespeare's books. By the way, Shakespeare's dates, if you don't know it, it's something in the 1600s, 1570, 1600. He was operating in all those times. So, you know, and the Lambs, of course, they were operating somewhere around the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the 19th century. Now, when Shakespeare was doing his thing, children essentially weren't reading. There wasn't a lot of book knowledge going down for the young people. Certainly, if there was only for the well-educated upper classes. Now, so we couldn't expect even children from today, 2024, to crack open a King Lear or a Macbeth, say Hamlet. We wouldn't expect them to open up these plays of Shakespeare and stick with them for very long. Because they are difficult, you know. And so what Mary and Charles Lamb, they had a great idea. We're going to make these into tales, stories. We'll change a little bit of the language and the sentences and so on. But for the most part, we're going to keep the meat and potatoes. And this way we can educate our people anyway, even though, you know, it's difficult. But we'll educate them. They'll be smart, you know. They won't be playing with ping pong machines or whatever they do today. And, you know, they'll grow their brains instead of growing their thumbs and index fingers. Now, that being said, I'm going to today and other times when I read old books, I'm definitely going to dig into something in my Encyclopedia Britannica, something 9. It's the 9th edition. I think it's 1875 is its date. I'm going to read a little of that because I was looking for something that would give me some information about Michaelmas, which is an English feast of celebration, pretty much like Christmas. There's gift givings and so on. Everything I've read so far puts it at September 29th. So why am I going to do this? Because while I'm in there, Michaelmas, of course I came upon the term Michael. Now this is in the encyclopedia. And there's like at least 9 references to Michael as being some sort of king in the old days, 1800s to 1200s. So I was reading that, and I said, you know what? This is essential information, and it's formatted in a fairly old fashion, meaning last quarter of the 19th century. And so between this and the Tales of Shakespeare, I know when I start reading this stuff, I'm transported back into the times that I'm trying to talk about, particularly in world history of England and Western Europe, which has been sitting on the sidelines for quite some time. However, this seems like an idea that I want to pursue, and I see the two of them as somewhat co-joined or related, so I'm going to do it, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, this first one, like I said, is going to be the Lamb's book, Tales from Shakespeare, approximately 1806. That's the best I can come up with. And Mary's name wasn't affixed to the book until after 1838, although I do know, based on reading the index, that the Mary, it's not on this index, but somewhere else, some other index, Mary wrote quite a lot of them. And I guess it was a brother-sister relationship that was fairly learned, you know. So anyway, briefly, some of the contents. And once again, this is going to be in story format, which is fantastic, you know. Anyway, we got Romeo and Juliet, King Lear, Othello, Timon of Athens, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, Comedy of Errors, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, and so on and so forth. And about another 12 or 13. So these are the tales, these are stories, and I'll read a little bit because, hey, I'm not really wanting to promote the individual stories and or plays of Shakespeare, but I'm trying to give a flavor of the times. That's what I'm trying to do. And by the way, this book has an awful lot of very nice color prints in it, like this one. I think that's very nice. See that? Very nice. That's quite a lot of them. And if I see others, I'll do the same thing. Plus, any other would appear to me to be decent black and whites, because the black and whites aren't too shabby either. See that? Nice stuff. And you know, reading the book and looking at the prints, you should get transported into those more ancient times. So here we go. Romeo and Juliet. A brief reading. The two chief families in Verona were the rich Capulets and the Montagues. There had been an old quarrel between these families, which was grown to such a height, and so deadly was the enmity, E-N-M-I-T-Y, between them, that it extended to the remotest kindred, to the followers and retainers of both sides, insomuch that a servant of the house of Capulet, nor a Capulet encounter with a Montague by chance, the fierce words and sometimes bloodshed ensued, and frequent were the brawls from such accidental meetings, which disturbed the happy quiet of Verona's estate. Old Lord Capulet, maybe it's Capulet, the French way of saying things, made a great supper to which many fair ladies and many noble guests were invited. All the admired beauties of Verona were present, and all comers were made welcome if they were not of the house of Montague. At this feast of Capulet, Rosa line, beloved of Rome, son to the old Lord Montenegro, was present, and though it was dangerous for Montenegro to be seen in this assembly, yet Benvolio, a friend of Romeo, persuaded the young lord to go to this assembly in the disguise of a mask, that he might see his Rosalind, and seeing her, compare her with some choice beauties of Verona, who, he said, would make him think his swan a crow. Romeo had small faith in Benvolio's words. Nevertheless, for the love of Rosaline, he was persuaded to go. For Romeo was a sincere and passionate lover, and one that lost his sleep for love, and fled society to be alone, thinking of Rosalind, who disdained him and never required his love with the least show of courtesy or affection. And Benvolio wished to cure his friend of this love by showing him diversity of ladies and company. Through this feast of Capulets, then young Romeo with Benvolio and their friend Mercutio went masked. Old Capulet bid them welcome and told them that ladies who had their toes unplagued with corns would dance with them. And the old man was light-hearted and merry, and said that he had worn a mask when he was young. It could have told a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear. And they fell to dancing, and Romeo was suddenly struck with the exceeding beauty of a lady that danced there, who seemed to him to teach the torches to burn bright, to show by night like a rich jewel worn by a blackamoor, a beauty too rich for use, too rich for earth, like a snowy dove trooping with crows, he said. So richly did her beauty and perfection shine above the ladies, her companions. While he uttered these praises, he was overheard by Tybalt, a nephew of Lord Capulet, who knew him by his voice to be Romeo. And this Capulet, being of a fiery and passionate temper, cannot endure that a Montenegro should have come under cover of a mask to fleer and scorn, as he said, at their, solemnizing, S-O-L, soul, and okay, that's a word that I'm not familiar with. SOLEMNITILES. And he stormed and raged exceedingly, and would have struck under young Romeo dead. But his uncle, the old Lord Capulet, would not suffer him to do any injury at the time, both out of respect to his guests and because Romeo had borne himself like a gentleman. And all tongues in Verona bragged of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. Tybalt, forced to be patient against his will, restrained himself, but swore that his vile Montagnard should at another time dearly pay for his intrusion. So that's the sound and meter of a Shakespeare play set in the act of a story. I'm going to put a marker there so that when I start this up again, which I hope I will, I'll know where I left off. But in the meantime, I'm going to slip over to these articles on Michael, 1 through 8, although I don't think I'll read all 8. And I'd like to get some of that. Now, once again, this is the 9th edition, 1875, so it means that these essays were written by various historians and scholars before 1875. So you should get a little bit of the flavoring of how they would have wrote their essays. Now, literally, there were hundreds of these guys who were lined up by Britannica to write these articles. And they were the foremost minds in their fields. So by reading this, I think you'll get a feel of that too, which in a way is a type of conveying world history. Because if you can convey the essence of how people were talking, not only the ordinary people, but the scholarly people, the historians, etc., you're conveying an essence of world history. And that's what this is all about. Now, granted, some of the earlier world history is fictional. And I don't have a problem with that. Fiction can convey world history just as well as scholarship. So anyway, to get on with things. So the word Michael, right off the bat, they're telling us here, somehow it means, it's got like a Greek word. It says, Michael, who is like God, appears in the Old Testament as a man's name synonymous with Micah. In the book of Daniel, the same name is given to one of the chief princes of the heavenly host, the guardian angel, or prince of Israel. And as such, he naturally appears in Jewish theosophy surrounding the throne of God. It is as guardian angel of Israel, or of the church, the true Israel, that Michael appears in Jude 9 and Rev 7. In this Western church, the festival, or in the Western church, the festival of St. Michael and all angels, Michaelmas, is celebrated on September 29th. It appears to have grown out of local celebration of the dedication of a church of St. Michael's, either at Mount Gargantua in Apulia or at Rome. It was a great day by the beginning of the 9th century. The Greek church dedicates November 8 to Saint Michael, Saint Gabriel, and all angels. So, that being said, we go forward to the first Michael, historical person. Michael I is something in parentheses about Ren Gabi. Who knows? Maybe that's the person they're getting this information from. Was an obscure nobleman, this is Michael I, who had married Procopia, the daughter of Nicephorus I, and been made master of the palace. His elevation to the throne was due to a revolutionary movement against his brother-in-law, Satursius, who reigned only 2 months after the death of Nicephorus on the battlefield, 812 AD. Elected as the tool of the bigoted Orthodox party in the church. Now, I'm not sure what the reference to the word tool means in this occurrence of it, but I suspect, just based on how it's inserted in the sentence, it means that he's something of a person that does things for somebody else, and therefore he's a tool. I'm not sure. If you want to look it up, great, please do so. And therefore, going back to this, the bigoted Orthodox party in the church. So he was elected as the tool of the bigoted Orthodox party in the church. Michael diligently persuaded the iconoclasts on the northern and eastern frontiers of the empire, but meanwhile allowed the Bulgarians to ravage a great part of Macedonia and Thrace. Having at last taken the field in the spring of taking the field the spring of 818, he was defeated near Bersinikia, and Leo the Armenian was saluted emperor in his stead in the following summer. Michael, after having been compelled to become a monk, was permitted thenceforth to live unmolested in the Isle of Prote, where he died in 845. Now that's the first reference to a Michael. And it's Michael I. Now there's a Michael II. And it's going to go all the way up to Michael 11. So Michael II, he's got the alternative name is Michael the Staminer. How would you like to be known as Michael the Staminer? Okay, so anyway. Michael the Staminer, a native of Armenia and was of humble origin and began life as a private soldier, but rose by his talents and other items he was noted for to the rank of general. He was one of those who had favored the election to the throne of his old companion in arms, Leo the Armenian, in 813, but detected in a conspiracy against the government of that emperor. and had been sentenced to death in December 820. His partisans, however, succeeded in assassinating Leo on the morning of Christmas Day and called Michael from the prison to the throne. The principal features of his reign, 820 829 AD, were a protracted struggle of nearly 3 years against his brother General Thomas, who aimed at the throne. The conquest of Crete by the Saracens in 833 and the beginning of their attack upon Sicily. So he was involved in those 3 activities for the most part of his reign. Conciliatory on the whole, in his policy towards the image worshippers, his own sympathies were iconoclastic. He incurred the wrath of these monks by entering into a second marriage with Euphy Roxanne, daughter of Constantine VI, who had previously taken the veil. So this daughter of Constantine VI had taken the veil, which, if you haven't heard that term, means she went into becoming a nun. She entered a nunnery, and so this marriage obviously got in the way of taking the veil. So if you're thinking of taking the veil, think about it twice, okay, before you do that. Might be complications. Okay, so here we go. So this Michael II, he did those 3 major things that we talked about, and then he died in 829 and was succeeded by Theophilus, his son. How nice, isn't it? The succession to the throne by heredity. That's a nice principle, isn't it? Most of the nations on the earth, if you don't know it, they all can trace their being back to some sort of heredity and being pushed up the ladder because of their genes. And it's probably a big and largest explanation for why world history is filled with so many stupid events. But, that's not what this is about. I'm not here to denigrate our innumerous genetically pushed up the ladder, kings and queens. It's not what I'm about. I'm not here to denigrate these people. I mean, what control did they have over their own genetics? They didn't have Ancestry.com to go back to. I'm getting silly now. I don't want to be silly. Here we go. Michael Tree. He's got a good name. Michael Tree III, the drunkard. Nice. I like this. It's right to the point. Boom. So, was the grandson of Michael the Stammerer. So on the one hand, you got this guy stammering, who stammers, and you got the drunkard. What a conversation that would have been, huh? Wouldn't you like to have seen that? Nice. Okay. So he succeeded his father, we told him about, at 3 years of age. So this guy, the drunkard, was 3 years old when he succeeded his father. Until his majority, at the age of 18, the affairs of the empire were managed by the Empress Regent, his mother, Theodora. His education was shamefully neglected, and it was during this period that Michael formed the disgraceful personal habits which are indicated by his surname. Now, I just want to point out that we're talking about that he reaches majority. And for those of you who haven't heard the term majority put in a sentence like that, basically what they mean, he came of age and he could succeed to the throne or ascend to the throne or jack himself up to the throne, whatever. But so that's what that term is in there for. And it's quite a lot of world history. It has to do with people reaching their majority. And before that time, quite a lot of world history before the next royal was going to go be on the throne. The country, the nation, would be in charge by a regent. And in this Michael's came, it was his mother, Theodora, who was the regent. Now, I believe that name, Theodora, comes up quite a lot in history, meaning to me that she was involved in probably a lot of shenanigans. But, you know, right away what I'm finding out about these essays in the Britannica is that they don't get off the trail. They're on the trail of Michael. They're not going to get off on the Theodora trail. They're sticking to Michael. And I like that, even though I'm questioning, well, who's this Theodora? What's she doing? What you got? Who you going? No, sticking with Michael. By the way, Michael, the archangel, I picked as my saint for confirmation. And my parents got quite upset because they wanted me to pick Nicholas, my grandfather's name. But I know very little about Nicholas. I know a little, but not a lot. Whereas Michael, the archangel, in every church I went, there he was, standing on a serpent with a spear in the ear of his somebody who was trying to do Michael harm. And so I admired that man. Good man, Michael. You want him on your side. So anyway, getting back to the story here, we have so in 1861, Michael, together with his uncle Bardas, undertook an expedition against the Bulgarians. But they were always beating up on the Bulgarians, weren't they? Which resulted in the conversion of the Bulgarian king, thenceforth bore the Christian name of Michael. The emperor had been less successful in the campaign which he led in person against Omar of Miletin in 860. But in 863, his uncle Petronius gained an important victory over the Saracens in Asia Minor. The year 865 was marked by the first appearance of the Russians in the Bosphorus. So check that out. 865, Russians in the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus being the body of water between Europe and Asia Minor. Now, that's a pretty early date to bring up the tribe of Russians. It's a pretty early date, although I do think in my readings I come across that the Rus were a people who came down from the north in the 7th century. Okay, the Rus, and they were called that because a lot of them had red hair, and so they were Rose or Rus. And that's getting off the track here. We'll get back to the track. Michael was assassinated in his palace in 867 by Basilius the Macedonian, whom he had associated with himself in the empire in the previous year. All right, there's 4 or 5 or 6 more Michaels, and if I can, I'm going to pick up where I left off. Michael 4, okay? And then we'll come back to this. Now, I just want to mention, in shutting this one off, that in the last world history, which I did yesterday, I was talking an awful lot about the duplicity that went on during World War II between Washington and the Far East. Just duplicity. And I mentioned terms such as China something, and these were people primarily in the United States, and of course also the well-heeled in China. The China lobby is what I'm talking about, and they did everything under the sun to make the case for Chiang Kai-shek. And one of the people who was big on this was a personal favorite of mine, Pearl S. Buck. She, of course, was a daughter of a missionary family and grew up in China and knew a lot about the Chinese history and their culture. And one of her early books, if not the first, The Good Earth, it won her all the fame any one person would ever need on this planet. And having read that at a young age, of course, I was impressionable. I'm pretty impressed with Pearl S. Buck and her books, and I probably read a few more. The Pearl, I think it was the Pearl, and a few more. And she had become one of my heroines, like Joan of Arc was one of my heroines. And in this penetration of thought into the World War II activities in the Far East, and I started to uncover scoundrel after scoundrel after scoundrel, particularly at the end of the China lobby spear. These folks, like the wives of the Chiang Kai-sheks of the world, and the sisters of the TV Soongs of the world, all these people had gathered force to hook-wink the American government, being the senators, the congressmen, the bureaucrats, the secretary of this and the secretary of that. The China lobby was hook-winking all of them, and they had a hook-wink the publishers, the editors, the authors, the scholars, all of them. And they hook-winked Pearl S. Buck. And that's what got me very distressed, because, like I said, she was one of my idols. And she bought the China lobby baloney hook, line, and sinker. And what the China lobby was doing was saying, Chiang Kai-shek is going to win. He's going to beat up these nasty Japanese. You wait and see. Just give him another $500 million, please. And they were falling for it. They were giving him the tanks, the Air Force. He had some heinous person who the American military had kicked out a number of times. I think his name was, I can't even think of it, the guy who Chiang Kai-shek gave him his Air Force. Chinook, something. The guy was like totally out of line, and the top brass in the American military organization didn't want anything to do with this guy. But Chiang Kai-shek, he liked him because whatever Chiang Kai-shek said, this guy would say yes, you know. So, poor Pearl S. Buck, who, like I say, I came to admire, and I still do. I still do. You know, anybody would have been hook-winked by that China lobby, even myself. I mean, I grew up in a time when, and I mentioned this, the diocesan priests in the schools that I attended, you know, they were still mouthing it. They wanted to get, they wanted to get Chiang Kai-shek put back on the throne over there. He had already been chased off to that rock in the water called Taiwan. It was called Formosa at the time. He was a snake in the grass, Chiang Kai-shek. You know, but the China lobby was promoting him as a saint and a savior and a great man. He wasn't a great man. He was basically totally uneducated. He had no understanding of warfare, tactics, administration, logistics. He was just dumb. And somehow he got the power. And when you got the power, you could do whatever you want. And so this China lobby promoted him. Now, there was another group called the China Hand. These were guys who were deep into the State Department and things like that, the Foreign Service, diplomats and so on. And they were trying to get the true information out, but they were beat back all the time. First of all, you know, FDR was the leader of the people who were hook-winked with the China lobby. So it's difficult to push back when you're pushing back up against the President of the United States. It's a difficult thing to do. But some of them, to their credit, they pushed back, until finally, you know, they got in trouble, big trouble. But what I brought up my childhood because, you know, I grew up smack dab in the middle of the political roar over Asia and China and Mao Zedong and his communists and the Russians and the roar. I mean, what I was getting the China lobby, what do you call that when you're being hook-winked? They call that something brainwashed. You know, I was getting that. You know, and you know, I mean, I still towed the line until fairly recently, which means most of my life I've been going around thinking the wrong things, which is not a good thing to do. But that's what I did. So my brain is clogged now with all these wrong events and how they did not actually happen. Did not. I mean, this China lobby, they had the audacity right after Japan was buried. Okay? Right after China was buried, and you know by what? The 2 bombs. After a little while, well, a year or two, the sisters, the Songs, Ailing, Meiling, Morling, whatever, they said, okay, we're asking you, Congress, and they pretty much got up whenever they wanted and addressed Congress. These are not even American citizens. And they said, we want a $4 billion loan. Okay? Fortunately, Truman was in power by then. And he didn't have anything but nasty words to reply with. Now, in the past, I have said that I don't like Truman because he comes off a little bit loose around the edges. You know, he seems a little bit too much peasant class. So, but he made some good decisions. He screwed up the Korean thing, and he was under the influence of the China lobby for that Korean fiasco. And but you know, from what I read, I'm picking out things here and there, which he seemed to have done okay with. But you know, if you want to have a real understanding of why the world is why it is, and as it is today, you have to understand what went on in the Far East between 1930, pick any year in the 30s, 1930s, to and through the 1980s. You have to have a thorough understanding of that. You'll learn all about, I won't go, just go cover that territory, and you'll have a very good understanding why China makes the plastic dolls and the Americans buy it. Why China is building a naval fleet at a terrifically rapid pace, while America is giving them the scrap metal to make it. You'll have a total understanding. Total. So, do what you want. I've wasted 50 of your minutes already, so I'm not going to waste any more. Have a good time. See you next time. Bye.